Hi, this is Mark at longterm, and in today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener we're going to be planting a couple of these beautiful plum trees. If you've already watched any of our videos on fruit growing, you can probably skip the next couple of minutes. If not, watch those because it'll tell you the essentials you need to know to be able to plant all your fruit. If you've watched one of our fruit growing videos before, you need to skip the next sort of 30 seconds to a minute because it's repeated on each one. Before you start with any single variety of fruit, make sure you're prepared for planting it. You need a large bucket of water if you're dealing with bare-rooted plants. You need some fish blood and bone. That's the fertiliser that we're going to add into the ground. You could use grow more, but fish blood and bone works over a longer period. It is organic, and the other thing about it is it's much harder to burn the delicate roots. You need some mycorrhizal fungi. If you don't know what mycorrhizal fungi is, there is a video we've done separately on this. There's a link below this film that will take you straight to it. Well worth incorporating into your planting schemes, into your planting holes. It can quadruple the amount of root growth you get. If you're planting trees, you need some tree ties and a stake, some good quality compost or some garden compost or well-rotted manure if you can get your hands on it, and obviously you need your plants. Now this variety of plants has just arrived with me. They all came from a specialist grower, and I cannot sort of recommend enough, use a specialist grower. My choice has been Blackmore Fruit in Hampshire, who have been superb, fantastic range of varieties available, and you cannot sort of help but be impressed with the quality of these sort of plants when they arrive. And you're thinking about some of these being with you for 25, 30 years. If we're planting pears, they're going to be with your grandchildren. So go for the best, go for a specialist. Right, now we'll be dealing with whatever variety we're talking about today. So here we are. If you're not already subscribed to learnhowtogarden.com, you could hop over there. There's a link below this video, and that just means you'll get our monthly newsletter every time we give you an update on what we're doing in our gardens, and it lets you know every time we put a film up. Plum trees. If I was going to plant a single fruit tree in a garden, for me it would be a plum. I know that they are notorious for bird damage, but with the modern varieties you can net them quite easily. You can make individual fruit cages, which we'll be showing you how to do just by using some bamboo and some knots that you could learn in the Boy Scouts. This variety is Victoria, probably one of the best known varieties. This in fact is a sort of selected clone of Victoria, and it's on a rootstock called VVA1. Now we've talked about rootstocks with pears, with apples. What you need to know is the commercial rootstock, which is the bit below this join, is actually put on here so that this is a smaller plant, and we're going to grow this as what's called a dwarf pyramid, which is what it says. It won't be particularly high, probably 2–2.5 meters when it's finished, and it'll be wider at the bottom than the top, so the outside shape will be a bit like a pyramid. We've prepared our ground, we've double dug our ground, we've got lots and lots of organic matter already in the ground, and because this is a bare-rooted plant, and that means that when it arrives, and I'll do this very quickly, there's just this small amount of root that's been taken out of the ground. It's really important for the first year that this is treated like a newborn baby. You're going to have to water it, fertilise it, and certainly you don't want these roots out of that bag any longer than sort of a couple of minutes before it goes in the ground. This one's been soaking in a pot overnight, so the first thing we need to do is establish the wind direction, because we're going to have to put a stake in to hold this tree firm. Now I know for me the prevailing wind direction is directly behind me. The old-fashioned way of putting a stake would be to put it vertically. The latest research says that we're better to put it in at 45 degrees, so I'll get that in now. So I put this stake in at 45 degrees, and that's because when the wind blows, the tree will be blown towards the stake and push it further into the ground rather than pulling away. And if you notice, it's quite low down, and I'll explain that in a sec. What you want to do now is take your fork and literally just work it into the bottom of the planting hole. Don't dig the planting hole up, it's just to loosen the soil, help with the drainage, and also work it into the sides. Now I'm not going to put any fresh compost or manure in the bottom of this planting hole. We've double dug it and we incorporated some into there, but the majority of your nutrients, your goodness, your compost you want put on afterwards as a mulch. What I'm going to do now is take a generous handful of fish blood and bone, which I use for planting most of my trees. It's a natural fertiliser, and then some mycorrhizal fungi. If you've never come across this, it's vital. Well, it's not vital, it's really beneficial, especially with bare-rooted plants. And again, sprinkle 2 or 3 ounces into the planting hole and onto the soil that's going to be backfilled. And what this does, it creates a secondary root system for your freshly planted trees, which benefits them exponentially. They grow so much better. It's naturally occurring, it's not a GM product. And then very quickly you take your bare-rooted tree that's been soaked. Very important, it doesn't go into the ground lower than that scion. That join where this rootstock joins the variety that you're meeting there, that has got to be above ground level, otherwise what you'll actually get is actually a different variety growing. We position it in our hole, and if we just take our fork, you can see that ground level's there, so the same as in the nursery. Close to the stake but not against it. Remember, it's got to grow. Now this is a homemade softwood stake. It'll be in the ground 3-4 years and then it'll rot away, by which time this tree will have actually produced enough of its roots to be stable itself. And then we start to backfill, gently jiggling the tree. We call this the jiggly tree dance, and the reason for it is to get this fine soil between all those roots, so we don't sort of create a pan of soil above them, which would mean that we couldn't get all the soil around the roots. It's important. And when you've backfilled about half of it, work the soil in with your foot. It's one of those times you can push. I mean, you don't need to stamp it, but in firmly. And then we just work the rest back round. Once it's in and firm down, we're going to surround it with a generous polo. By that I mean we're going to use a lot of this compost around the area that the roots are likely to spread out into, but we're going to leave an area around the trunk free of compost. It's going to have a minimum of 2 gallons of water put on to water it in, and then we just take one of our standard tree ties round the tree, through the tie and onto the stake, so that the tree can't move. Now if you notice, I've staked this tree very low down indeed. Now the latest research I have read, and 2 or 3 papers have been written on it, and it's sort of fairly accepted now. The roots are what you want to keep stable. This piece wobbling in the air is actually quite good, because the more this wobbles, the tree knows it needs to be more stable. Therefore it sends out lots and lots of fine roots to stabilise it. If you stake the tree all the way up here, it will always have a weaker root system. What I'll probably do in the next episode is show you how I train some of these branches to get a nice open shape for our dwarf pyramid. So that's Victoria, that's one of the plums that we're growing. We're going to plant one on the opposite side, which is an Asian plum, much sweeter, planted in exactly the same way as this Victoria. The difference is that Lizzie, which is the Asian plum, strange name for an Asian plum, is actually going to be on St Julian A, which is a rootstock which will create a larger plant. Still a dwarf pyramid, but bigger than this one. And it's so over the next few years we can show you the different size. This, the VVA rootstock, is perfect for a small garden. The other great thing about Victoria as a plum is it's self-fertile, which means it needs no other plum anywhere near it to actually get a really good crop of fruit. You'll get a great crop of fruit just by growing a single fruit tree. It's much more difficult with apples and pears to achieve that. So if you're thinking about it, you know, a plum is a really good tree to start with. So that's Mark at Learn How to Garden saying thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.